Ladies and gentlemen, at the time of recording this video, it's July 2024, and Magnus Carlsen is still the best chess player in the world. But I haven't made a video about him for a while. Probably a record on this channel. Why? There haven't been that many top-level events. The truth is, there's a bunch of random chess tournaments going on, but none of the top players are really participating in them. Until now. It's time for the Speed Chess Championship. The Speed Chess Championship is a 16-player knockout tournament where every single round the players play 5+1 blitz, 3+1 blitz, and 1+1 bullet over the course of 3 to 4 hours. And in round one, Magnus Carlsen was in vintage form. He won the match against his opponent, Grandmaster Min Le from Vietnam, who is an online blitz and bullet specialist. Magnus won the match 20.5 to 3.5. Except he didn't lose a game. Two of the games that went to Min Le were by disconnection of the internet from where Magnus Carlsen was staying. In one of those positions, he had a slightly worse game, but he never lost the game from start to finish. And I picked 4 to share with you because it's really crazy how he manages to do this over and over. These are games with different flavors, different textures, different feel. So your goal is going to be to learn 3 things from this video. And I'm going to put on my teacher's hat and my best teacher's tank top. And by the way, recently I've been, hitting the gym a lot more. I'm currently on the road to GM, so I'm been consistently going to the gym with my wife for about a year now. And today we did a lot of tricep. I've been trying to build this little weird muscle over here. Last time I talked about fitness in the YouTube video, I got a few comments like, that's all you lift? And that's weird, because I thought about it and I was like, if you're an active attendee of the gymnasium where you improve yourself and your muscles and everything, why would you insult others who don't lift as much as you? That's really weird behavior. And just a general PSA outside of chess, just be nicer to people. I mean, the internet has given a lot of you this weird empowerment to be terrible. Yeah, don't do that. Just spreading a little of positivity, Now, can you insult your friends when they make terrible chess moves? Absolutely. So we're going to open this game up. We're going to take a look at every game that Magnus played from his perspective. His opponent opened up this game with pawn to d4. Magnus played knight f6, and then he played b6. Now, the reason the move b6 doesn't make sense under traditional chess wisdom is because Black never made any intention to take the center. You cannot take the center with your knight and bishop because what the other person is going to do is they're going to take the center, and now he has completely secured a third pawn. Normally what white does is what black does is play e6. Now you're always threatening to play d5. Now if white plays knight c3, you play bishop b4, pinning the knight to the king and disallowing e4. If queen c2, then you can play d5 or c5. Magnus plays b6. Now I have played b6 myself in the past. And normally what black tries to do here is immediately fight back for the center, but to be honest with you, this just gives a position where white has a lot of space and black is not doing that great. So, Magnus plays this. Completely and totally surrendering the entire center to his opponent. Now, the game here becomes very quickly a locked center and a king's Indian defense. So Magnus plays g6 and bishop to g7. Now, again, look at the structure. Now, let me rewind. Imagine from the beginning of the game, we had g6, knight c3, bishop g7, knight f3, d6, e4, e5, d5, castles, queen c2. In this position, people who play black will literally never play b6 and bishop b7. Now, white probably will not play queen c2 because it's not a very useful move. But this structure, now watch me go back to the game, okay? Watch me return to the game. That was a blooper. It was supposed to transition to the structure. So the structure in the game that we got was very similar. It's a very similar structure. This. But in the game, Magnus already committed this way. Now, In the King's Indian defense, black likes to play for a kingside attack. It's in the name, King's Indian, right? Kingside attack. White likes to play b4, c5, and attack over here. So from a particularly strange move order, watch as Magnus uncorks a pure masterclass from start to finish. Keep in mind, black wants a kingside attack, white wants a queenside attack. Ready? Bishop c8. So he played this on move 2 and 3, right? Played this on move 2 and 3. But now he says, okay, the bishop belongs over here. I know that. I have pre-existing knowledge, right? Now, white now needs to get moving. So he does. He plays a3, and Magnus sees that b4 is coming, so he plays a5. You cannot play b4, right? Because I'm going to take, and the rook is here. So now you should probably play rook b1. But you shouldn't play rook b1. What you were supposed to do here is you were supposed to play b3 and slowly get ready to do this. This seemingly very natural move designed to stop b4, which works because there are various tactical things here. This move immediately allows Magnus to shut down the whole queenside with a4. The setup that Min Lei chose was inaccurate. And the point is that the knight cannot simultaneously defend the center and the queenside. So if knight a4, the queen is now overloaded. You have this, queen e4, rook a4. And this is not what white wants. Remember, white wants advancement here. Black is now going to very quickly go over to that side of the board. So a4. So now Min Lei is not going to be able to implement one of the critical game plans of the King's Indian defense. And Magnus puts the knight on c5. Min Lei plays h3. So now black is slightly better. Why is black slightly better? Because, well, you shut down a key resource of your opponent in these types of positions. Now this knight rotates this way to support the knight on c5, to potentially support another transfer point. Rook e1, queen e7. Necessary preparations have been made. And here is f5. So now we go to phase 2. We go to phase 2 implementing our game plan, right? So we're implementing, and keep in mind the opponent is a 3,000 rated player. Magnus is making it look like this is a sparring match. Like this is not a high stakes event for thousands of dollars. He's just implementing the game plan completely flawlessly, right? White plays f4 trying to strike back. Now, here with black, you've got to clarify what's going on. Do I take one of the pawns, both of the pawns? A, B, A, B? Do I take none of the pawns? Like, what do I do? Well, Magnus takes on f4. That's important because now, regardless of how white takes back, we have a resource here, and we're very happy. And the resource is completely counterintuitive. You would think that this bishop is a beast, right? No, we get rid of the bishop. The bishop has served its purpose. Why? Because now we destabilize the white center, and after this, we take the pawn. So now we are a pawn up. Now, to get the pawn back, white is going to have to invest time and resources. So he's going to have to trade off some pieces. So we play knight f6. Now, the only way to get the pawn back is to trade the bishop, probably trade the queen, probably trade the knight. There it is. Queen f6. And Magnus, the best endgame player in the world, and maybe of all time, develops a piece with tempo, brings the bishop back so he has pressure on this pawn, defends his 7th rank, and now let's go to work. Rook, bishop, 6 pawns, rook, bishop, 6 pawns. Why is black better? Black is Magnus Carlsen. That's a big advantage. Black has most of the critical pawns on the opposite color of the enemy bishop. When I say critical pawns, I mean pawns that cannot really be easily targeted. These are very critical pawns because, of course, we can do this. This pawn controls these 2 pawns. So not only did we suppress play earlier in the game, in the middle game, we also now fix, is what that's called. That's called fixing. Fix those pawns. You learned something, and you've hopefully been learning thus far. Fix those pawns. And also we have 2 split pawns versus 2 pawns together, like in bowling. King f2, we bring the king up. h4. Now we play rook e8, seizing control of the file. White can't easily trade, because after this trade, there's probably some infiltration points. But also, if rook e1 was played, maybe Magnus would just move away. So bishop f3. And the first game that the first move Min basically has to make, where he can't really autopilot, Yeah, he blunders because the king just walks directly up to the pawn, and white cannot defend the pawn because the rook would come in, hitting the bishop, disallowing this, and ready to go over there, and in one move, the entire position for white disintegrates. So the only move here to hold the game for white after rook e8 was probably offering the trade of rooks. And that's not very intuitive, but you are able to do this because white is defending against this advancement with this check. And that's literally the whole reason. Probably Magnus wouldn't have traded. So Min Lei makes a mistake, and Magnus just absolutely surgical, takes the pawn, brings the king back, pins the bishop, rook f7, now improves, right? Improving those pawns. 4 of 5 critical pawns on the dark squares. Now the rook plants forward. The second the rook comes in, the king comes back. Why does the king not go forward? Because you would allow counterplay. So he plays king back to f6, centralizes all the pieces, wins the pawn, and in this position, white resigned. Magnus won this game with like 98% accuracy, something completely ridiculous. And he won games even more absurd than that. So the game that I just showed you, he was kind of pressuring, right? Well, in this game, we had again, Magnus playing this knight f6, b6. We have a transposition to a Torre or a Trempowski, which is an opening that I've played a lot. White gets a very, very big center here. You'll notice that Magnus is trying to use his flank pawn to trade, but white has a flank pawn to recapture. Knight c6, and from the early going, I mean, white's just got more space. His position looks a little bit more pleasant. Black doesn't have any clear play. So we have d6, we have a capture, and now rather than castling, Magnus decides knight d4. Now, normally this is not a good move. It's not a good move because white can take the knight, and then white can give a check, which is just a direct thing. But actually king f8, and he correctly evaluates that the king is safe over here. The bishop actually has no role whatsoever, and actually it's black who's creating a multitude of threats. So again, correct decision-making, breaking the traditional principles of the game, not castling so quickly. White goes here, and now we get an endgame that looks like this. Completely symmetrical structure, A, B, E, F, G, H, knight versus bishop. So when you think about the endgame, king activity, rook activity, weaknesses of the opponent, and trying to keep most of the enemy pawns on the color that we want to infiltrate against. So white would love to get the pawns on the light squares, get a king to the center, get a rook to the center. Black would love to just, remember like in the previous game, a4, well, black would love if they could get some of this because then these pawns are liabilities in the long run. Rook d1, we have a trade. Magnus has to castle. He's got to get his rook in the game. The only reason Magnus is not much worse here is because he has rook d8. And you cannot defend, you cannot take these things, right? So that's actually what happens, and we have this endgame. I mean, this is an endgame where people agree to a draw. Like, here come the kings, right? Here comes the knight. Gotta be a little careful. And now here come the kings. The kings run over, b4. So it's actually white who voluntarily puts pawns on dark squares, but okay, I get it. You're controlling my pawns, fine. Could you have played b3? Probably. In fact, in the long run, I would argue b3, and even a4 not right away. This is maybe even better for white because that way your pawn is not a liability, and then you can put your king on c4, and life is good. But Min Lei, right, he plays b4. So now Magnus plays f5, and now we see the early makings of freezing the pawns on the wrong complex. If white plays g3, black might play g5. And if white takes, then this is a weakness, so maybe white won't take. Maybe white will go like here. But suddenly you've put a lot of pawns on the wrong square, and then maybe there's bishop ideas, but in the long run, this should be a draw. In the long run, this should be a draw, so maybe instead of that, black will take on f4 and try to sneak around and cause some, but probably it should be a draw with best play, but when you play Magnus, you don't play. Now we take, so now there's imbalance, right? So king d6, now here come all the pawns, right? All the pawns are trying to participate, and a very critical move, g5, and Min feels the pressure, and suddenly goes, wait a minute, I can't move anything. If I take here, Magnus takes on d4 first, and now here he's winning because one pawn fixes two pawns, remember? One pawn, fix two pawns. Here it's on the other side, and the way you win here with black is you go here, and you just march the king down the board until white runs out of moves. If white goes here, king d5, king g5, e4, king f4, king d4. It's a race, but believe it or not, it's actually me who queens first, and me who wins the queen. So there's all sorts of ideas here, and Min blunders. What he had to do was he had to go here, allow the bishop in, and try to survive this endgame by creating equal counterplay. But he couldn't. And the color complex of the position allows for a very swift transformation. This is called an outside pawn majority, and in the endgame, it's fatal. Why is it fatal? Because when you try to go defend yourself, you are not in time. After take, king f4, I take. You now have to spend one crucial final move, taking my pawn back, and I win. King d4, king c3, and that's it. I've made it to both your pawns, and I win the game. From a position that looked completely harmless, but there is always poison when your opponent is Magnus. That first game, sure, he had the pressure throughout. He was looking for complications. This last game, I mean, yes, an argument can be made. Min Lei blundered, but he didn't blunder by himself. His opponent led him to the blunder, but not every game was like that. This game ended in 18 moves, and he was getting it done quickly. He was getting it done slowly. And in the last game of today's video, I will show you a game where he played the King's Gambit. Like, sometimes everything is going. Everything. So you start playing things where you take more risk, because when you take more risk, you get more reward, and things look real nice on the highlight reel. So he had a game, and, you know, Min Lei himself likes to play the London. Magnus was playing the London. I think Magnus played about 15 different openings. It really was a masterclass. C5, excuse me. E3, queen b6. This is one of the ways to play. And now here, aggressive gambit with pawn to c4. Completely disregarding the pawn on b2. Why is he able to do this? Why is he able to give away a pawn and an attack on the rook? A lot of us would panic here. The reason is knight d2. And essentially, if I can summarize this in a general way, the amount of time that black invests in winning this pawn will require likely 3 to 4, if not 5 queen moves. And in that time, white gets pressure and better development and better coordination, which leads to long-term problems for black. So for example, if black just says, all right, I'm going to go here and castle. Well, now I take. Okay, I'm going to take with if the knight, maybe it hits knight hits the bishop. Okay, now I take this knight. What? Yeah, because now rook b1. And if you take another pawn, this is a problem. Whereas in the previous game, Magnus was hiding his king. Yeah, here the king's just in the center. I can even castle. There's knight c3. Let me be a little careful. Let me play like knight e5 and knight f7 first. Now we see the makings of how you can lose a position like this very quickly with black. Right? You take a rook, knight f7 check, king e7. Now I can castle. You take a knight. I mean, I'm just completely winning here, right? So we see how the early investment, right, pays off. And by the way, Min just never took the pawn. So the queen went out to b6, but it never took the pawn, which means, yeah, Magnus is now able to take over. Now, if you're going to take the pawn, you run into rook b1, queen a3, cd, knight b5 stuff. Not to mention, probably knight takes d5 is fine. And if you take the queen, well, then I take, and then I'm going to try to go to b5. If you try to shut that down, I take, you take, I castle. I've had 4 things developed. You have nothing. You have nothing developed at all. And this is an isolated pawn, which I'm going to target. So bishop c5, queen d2. Min targets Magnus. Knight, queen. That's a nice pin. Magnus moves the queen again. Again. Development. He has 4. Min only has 3. Castles. Bishop e2. And here's something very funny happens. Min is like, well, I'm very clever. I waited for Magnus to move the bishop. Now I take on c4 because Magnus has to take back. Now he spends 2 moves moving his bishop. I play bishop d7, I go to the c file, and I'm very happy. And Magnus says, I don't have to take the pawn. I don't have to. Again, you're playing a queen's gambit position. You have no development. I'm going to wait. I don't care about this pawn. I'll win it back with my knight, with my bishop, at some point. Now Min is like, all right, well, now I'm going to get rid of this knight. Now, Magnus, if he takes with the queen, I have this. He's not going to take with the pawn because then he blocks his own queen. Magnus takes with the pawn, blocking his own queen. So now Min is thinking, okay, well, I can defend this pawn, but then he's going to put pressure on it, so let me play knight c6. Now he's going to take back. No, he still doesn't take. He just makes an improving move. Why? Because the pawn's not going anywhere. And if black invests time and resources into defending the pawn with something like knight a5, you lose. I just go straight. Sorry, not rook d6. Maybe bishop d6 is even nice. Rook b1 is nice. Point is, you just get a much worse position. Queen a5. Finally, he takes back. The question is, how does black develop any pieces? If you play bishop to d7, play rook b1 attacking the pawn. If you play b6, I play rook b5 and I trap your queen, basically. So Min Lei plays e5. And can you believe that this game ends in 4 moves? 4 moves. Black resigns. How? It's 0.6. Well, Min plays e5 because he's trying to activate his bishop. But now I go here, and I'm trying to damage your structure. Guess what? Nothing you can really do about that. It's nothing. Why? Because if you try to move out of the center of the board, well, I can rotate around, but also you're basically blocking your development. Min says, all right, e4. If he takes me, I'm going to take him, and he has to move his bishop. Take, he moves the bishop, I take, position's probably equal. Well, Magnus knows that the bishop is hanging, but he's also a Gotham subscriber. You don't have to acknowledge danger if you can create equal or exceeding danger. We call that danger levels around here. Rook to d5. Not only is, and rook d5 is not just a queen attack. There's always a deeper idea when these guys play. The point is I'm rotating over here, and the king has 0 defense. And when you consider the fact that 20 points of material are about to point at the king from different angles, the game is simply over. The king is brutalized. Queen to b6, rook to g5, black resigns. Technically, rook h5 was even better. Why? Because after g6, you can sack the queen. Both of the pawns are pinned. This is an absolute pin. This is a relative one. Just out of nowhere. Like, the position was in the balance. But he did enough annoying things to throw his opponent off and make him go, e5, I gotta get my bishop back into the game. And so quickly, rook t5. Hopefully the arrows are clear. And he went here. Rook h5 was even better, but rook g5. If g6, you just take. Just take. And the same exact thing. It's mate. And one last game for you, a King's Gambit. And Magnus here does not play the King's Gambit where you need to control queen h4. In fact, he invites it. Queen to h4 check. This is one of the most badass King's Gambits you can play. It's also one of the best, practically speaking, because what you will realize here, if you're brave, is a lot of people with black will go queen h4 thinking you're a huge moron. And in this game, it was a different move order. It was knight c6, d4, and then queen h4. It doesn't really matter. You'll play queen h4, king e2, and then you're going to push your d-pawn. And then it's shockingly difficult to do something about this. I think the top computer move is queen h4, king e2, d5, which nobody at your level is going to know. Not a single human. They're cheating if they play it. I mean, it's just, you know, because it allows you to take and threaten a fork. There's this, knight f3, and then knight c6, sacrificing a fork, sacrificing a rook, knight e5, queen e1, knight f3, defending the queen. You got to go here. They take discover check. Then you play like king e1. Then they have to go g5, the final move. And this is how black gets an advantage. Nobody's going to do that. They're all going to probably play like this. And now you develop the knight. Now you take back the pawn. And the final gangster move you play here is you take with the king. That is why this is called the King's Gambit, because that is what the king does. He gets out there. And the amazing thing about the King's Gambit is that if opponents are not able to take advantage of it, it's a Vienna Gambit on steroids. Like me. No, just kidding. I don't. All natural. And you know, a little creatine, little whey protein. You know how it goes. But, yeah, in the King's Gambit, the position that you get basically is the center, more pawns in the center, and 2 bishops and more space. Knight f6. Now we play g3, because now the queen's got to go. Now we go here. Now we trade the queen. We have 2 bishops. We have the center. And watch how quickly things can change. Black castles, and that's a losing move. What black had to do here was probably play bishop e7 and go short. But even if bishop e7, I mean, you can run it straight down the center. You can develop a piece. Black will castle. You'll put another rook in the center. Your position's just fantastic. I mean, this is basically the diagram we draw in beginner chess books. Minus the queen is gone and etc. Yeah, here, bishop c4. How do you defend this pawn? You can't. If rook d7, I have e5. I have rook f1 and then e5. So Minlay tries to go for a tactic. After knight e4, he has a fork. Unfortunately, I have this. And the tempo that you spend taking my bishop, I'm taking the pawn and I'm forking your rooks. Down in 14 moves. Of course, he was already tilted. At this point in the match, he was down a lot. If this was game one, he would have been sharper. But point stands. Trades everything. Pushes down the center of the board. You can't take the pawn on c2 because the rook goes to c1. d6, make some trades. And by the way, just Magnus is Magnus, so he doesn't have to go here. For all of you, take the knight. You're up material. Just take the knight. The knight is way trickier than the bishop here. Put the rook out. Rook f4, rook e4. Take on c4. Rules for him, not for you, okay? He goes here. He trades the bishop because that's the more correct thing to do. And it also damages the pawns. Rook e7, rook d4, rook f7. And the rook comes back to the second rank. And in this position, Minlay resigned. And Magnus got it done in so many different ways. He got it done in the deepest of endgames. He got it done in positional masterclasses from the King's Indian structures. He got it done playing absurd, blistering attacks, catching his opponent the second he would make a mistake. And he did it by playing flashy stuff like the King's Gambit. He won 20.5 to 3.5. 2 of those games might have ended draws or wins for him. And yeah, Minlay managed about 6 draws in the match, five draws in the match. No, less, because he got 2 points from wins. Yeah, he managed 3 draws and 2 wins. But 2, like literally, 3 draws, 2 wins, but both of the wins came by forfeit. Unbelievable. Magnus will take on Arjun Erigaisi in the second round. I'll put a link in the description to the bracket. I was doing commentary. And the live final, it's the first year ever, a little bonus content for you. This is the first time ever the final 4 of the Speed Chess Championship are going to be played live in Paris, France. The biggest thing that is happening in Paris, France in 2024. I will be there. It's in September. I'll put a link in the description. You can get tickets, actually. And VIPs get to meet me, get to meet the players. So for those of you that want to spend a little money, go to Paris in September. You can do that. And yeah, just an incredible game by Magnus. Match. So that's all I have for you today. Get out of here.